Battle Chasers Nightwar is a dungeon crawler infused with JRPG elements. The JRPG comes through mainly in the combat screen, which we'll take a look at here as soon as we get into combat. The game begins in town, where you pick 3 of your heroes that you have available. You can unlock up to 6, but you can only take 3 in your party. When you do, you sit out and you're locked in with those guys until you come back to town. And of course, each hero has unique combat abilities, but because dungeons are important, they have traps, they have puzzles, there's lots of loot to collect, and of course there's creatures that you see on the map that you can interact with before combat. They also have, each hero also has an important set of dungeon skills. We have 1 equipped on the heroes right now. You can see it to the right of their portraits, and they each do something a little different. Gully, who's the main character, whose father, before he disappeared, left her with a pair of really powerful gauntlets that basically turned her into a superhero. She has a ground pound she can do that if there are creatures nearby, it'll stun them so that you can avoid combat if you want. Garrison has a dash for dodging traps. Calibretto, the big warrior war golem guy, he's actually kind of like a robot druid. He's got heals, so he can do heals outside of combat. I'm going to equip this sword I just picked up here. People familiar with Darksiders and our work at Vigil on Darksiders may recognize the sword. So now we're going to dive into the dungeon. And really the key pillars in dungeons are storytelling, which you saw a little bit of there, and for players who are really interested in knowing more about the history and depth of the world, we sprinkle the world with what we call lore items. So you may find a piece of paper or a statue that's got an engraving or a picture on a wall that tells a little bit of the story that gives some insight into the backstory and the history of the Battle Chasers world. One of the things that probably the biggest reason players are motivated to come back into the dungeons, and because they are randomly generated, every time you visit them they're different, the thing you're really going for is ingredients to feed the crafting system. Crafting is the most important progression mechanic with the characters in Battle Chasers. They do level up and they do improve in stats, and there's also a perk system for each hero, but the gear is really what improves their stats the most. And so you can do some crafting with the crafting ingredients in town, but the best stuff that you can craft, you actually have to be in the dungeons, and you have to find the crafting stations in the dungeons to be able to craft. And they're randomly generated. There's always a crafting station in a dungeon, but you have to go into the dungeon to find it. So here I have enough resources that we gave the players at start to craft some armor for Gully. So I'm going to go ahead and make this and equip it real quick. I'm going to need it for the boss fight, because he has killed me in these demos before. Makes me look like a fool, but he doesn't mess around. So I'm going to use Garrison's dash here to get past these traps, and I'll avoid combat too. So you can skip combat using the dungeon skills if you want, but creatures are as important a crafting resource as some of these resources that you find in the dungeon are. So there I got some stuff that I can use in crafting. But creatures also drop resources, so you don't really want to avoid combat unless it's absolutely necessary. Now when you come into combat, this is where you see the JRPG inspiration. Final Fantasy is obviously something we're very fond of, and this we sort of started with that template and then added some of our own twists, which I'll explain here. So people familiar with turn-based RPGs, a lot of this looks familiar. Health, mana, abilities across the bottom. Because it is strictly turn-based, we have an initiative system here that depicts the order of operations. These abilities on the left are instant, so I can perform it right now. These cost mana and take time to cast, so you can see how it's moving Garrison down the initiative timeline. But I'm just going to do instant now. You'll see too, as I perform attacks, this orange bar fills up. That's the battle burst meter. Battle bursts are like our super attacks, kind of like the Street Fighter. It's like the Street Fighter meter in that it builds up into 3 sections, and each hero has different battle bursts you can equip that take 1, 2, or 3 levels of the burst meter. Right now I don't have enough, but you can come over here and look at the battle bursts they have equipped. Gully's Boulder Toss takes 2 levels, 200 battle bursts, so I'm going to wait a little while before I try that. These guys are already doing damage, so I need to heal. And then the last key component to combat is every time you perform one of the instant attacks are also free, but whenever you do, you'll see that it builds up the mana meter, except it'll extend it with a little red meter that we call Overcharge. Overcharge is like bonus mana that you can use. Here, let me do one right now. So I'll finish this guy off. And you see it built up Overcharge for Gully here. Overcharge is lost at the end of a battle, but whenever you perform an ability that costs mana, it will use the Overcharge first. So it's a way you can conserve mana in a fight. Or if you're out of mana, say a boss is just drained you completely of mana, you can do basic attacks to build your overcharge meter up and then still cast abilities. So you're never at a position where it's impossible to do special attacks. All right, and the dungeon that I'm in right now did actually randomly generate, so I'm going to have to look around to find the boss. Let's see. And the game is very much about collection and completionism, so one of the things that will be informing players' decision to go into dungeons is the Bestiary, which tracks which creatures you've seen and gives you tips on how to kill them based on the moves you've seen them perform. And one of the cool things about it is you may unlock Bestiary entries that will tell you when a rare creature is going to appear. Here's an example of the lore. So if you interact with this, you'll get some backstory into the world. In this case, it's talking about the Dark Order, which is a language you have to learn before you can translate that particular piece of lore. But yeah, you'll use the Bestiary to track the locations of some very rare creatures. This boss that we're about to see is actually not the boss of this dungeon. He's an example of one of those rare creatures that if you unlock his Bestiary entry, you can track him to this dungeon. I'm going to use dungeon skills to skip combat. Let's see how much time I've got. That's the trap. Yeah, so this guy would only appear in the dungeon if you had talked to the Beastmaster and discovered his location inside this dungeon, which is called the Iron Outpost. And the whole game takes place in this fantasy world that is infused with technology, kind of similar to Final Fantasy VII, but leaning more towards the fantasy side. But this character, Calibretto, is actually the last of his kind of these sentient war golems. He's a good guy, and one of the things that's interesting, I think, about Battle Chasers is that characters don't always fill the role you would assume based on just looking at them. Like, for example, Calibretto, who's got this giant arm cannon, he's actually something of a druid, so he's the one that's got heals. So right now, he's the only healer I have in the group. And I need to heal primarily Gully, who, because of the gauntlets that her father left her, even though she's a 10-year-old girl, she's the tank. She's the one that can absorb the most damage. So there's an interesting take on some of the typical RPG classes. All right. Okay, so I'm actually going to have to focus on this guy because... So like we saw, the heroes have their special attacks, the battle bursts. Bosses also have battle bursts that they can use, usually triggered at some specific point. So in this guy's case, if I get him to 50% health, he's going to start doing his battle burst over and over and over again. And so that's something I will probably have learned by reading the Bestiary or just by dying to him, which may happen as I'm playing. But now I'll be prepared for it by making sure that I put my damage shield up from Gully and kept my guy's health topped off. That's what I need to do. And I almost have enough battle burst now. I'm saving up for a level 3 battle burst to really wreck this guy when he goes into his rage mode. Let's see. I may just use it now, just because. Do some damage. Okay, let's see. I'm going to use the single target heal. And so I could do one of 2 battle bursts with Garrison right now. This one only takes 1 level of the battle burst, so I could leave some for Gully. It puts a really heavy dot on the enemy, but I'm going to do this one instead because it does the most damage. And I've got it built up, so I might as well use it. And this boss is going to hit me enough that I'm going to get the battle burst meter filled up again anyway. Okay, so now I need to start building up some overcharge with Garrison. So I'm going to do Strip Strike here. So now he's under 50% health, so the fight just got a little more serious for me. I'm going to put the damage shield up. Okay. I probably should have had more damage shield up before he started doing this attack. If he kills either my healer or my tank, I'm dead. So I got to be very protective of them. And I can tell by the initiative bar that Gully has her shield attack ready to cast, so I don't need to worry. I think I'll be okay. Let's see. I'm going to put a bleed on him to get through some of his armor. Okay. We're doing all right so far. So now that I've built up some overcharge with Garrison, some heroes have abilities that have a special reaction to using overcharge. So not only does it conserve my mana to use abilities that use overcharge, but in this case, if I use overcharge when I cast this ability, it'll do 1 point of extra damage for each point of overcharge that I use, which is also why you'll notice Garrison actually has a bigger potential bar for overcharge than the other heroes, because he behaves more like a warrior, like, you know, where I want to build up overcharge sort of like rage and be constantly using his overcharge. I'm going to do that here. It'll hit him pretty hard. Yikes. Okay. Gully has a cool battle burst that's really useful in a boss fight because it doesn't do a lot of damage, but it has a stun component, and stuns in our game basically just move the enemy back down the initiative bar. So I'm going to cast this and buy myself some more time to heal. Hopefully. Hopefully it's enough. Oh, but he's out of mana, so I could do one of two things. I could start doing abilities that build overcharge so that I have enough mana to cast these, but I'm going to go ahead and use my flasks. There is no inventory where you can stack potions. You have 2 slots where you can equip flasks, and flasks are something you can craft that replenish every time you leave a dungeon, but they have a fixed number of charges. So in this case, I have 3 mana flasks and 5 healing flasks. And if I decide I don't need healing flasks because I have enough healing, I can instead craft and equip like a flask that might give me an attack power bonus or a cleanse debuff or give me movement speed in the dungeon. So there are a lot of different flasks you can craft, but there's a limited number of uses to them. So you can't just chug potions to survive a boss fight. You have to use strategy with your ability choice. Okay. Do this. And here I'm going to do Swift Strike again. This is making me nervous right here. Okay, I'll be all right. Let's get back on him. And there's synergy between the attacks too. You see the boss has the bleed icon over his health nameplate up there. Calibretto has an attack ability, if I didn't need him just to heal, that does additional damage if the target's bleeding, called Obliterate. So there's synergy in your choice between characters. You want to make, for optimal strategy, especially when you are in the higher difficulty dungeons, you want to make sure that your heroes are playing off one another's abilities. So this is the Obliterate, would do additional damage since he's bleeding, but I need to keep healing with him or I'm going to die, so. Gully's getting low on mana too, so I'm going to do some abilities that generate overcharge. So now I have 25 mana effectively, so I can do some new abilities with her. Definitely Warblade with him to consume his overcharge. And I think we're going to be in okay shape. Maybe. These guys are in danger here. Okay, so it's going to be a race to the finish line now. I'm going to finish him off, let's see. Finish him off in style here, Blade Master. That'll do it. There he is. And so that's the end of that particular dungeon demo, but he would have dropped some really nice stuff that I could then use to go into crafting. And I think we actually have a few extra, maybe a minute, let's see. So we'll take a look at another boss battle we have. So, sure. In the overworld map, we have, there are airships that fly around, and if you run into one of the airships, then you get basically accosted by airship pirates. They're like random boss battles that occur in the overworld. This is an example of one of those. I don't know how far we're going to get, because the next presenter may be coming in a second, but let's see what I can do. So the trick with these guys is that if you hit the tank on the bottom very frequently, he builds up rage, and he performs a super attack. So you see every time he does an attack or takes damage, he builds up rage. But the guy on the top, so you don't want to attack him. That guy's attack hits everybody, including other enemies, so he can take out his own guy with it. But if I don't attack the guy on the bottom, the guy on the top has all the defense. So you have to decide which way you want to kill him. And when one dies, the other enrages. So you have to kind of pick your poison. I'm going to choose to beat on the guy on the top because the super attack that the guy on the bottom does is seriously lethal. Okay, let's see. I'm going to do some AoE on him. I do need to hurt the bottom guy a little bit. Important to keep the heals up too. So I'm going to do a single target heal on him here. Oh. Is he bleeding? Alright, I gotta heal him because he's gonna die. If he dies, it's game over, forget it. There's no way to win a boss fight without making you dead. Let's see. Because she's also the tank, you have a taunt too that would focus all of the attacks on her, and I could focus all my healing on them. But these guys are tough enough that actually is kind of risky, so I'm not gonna do that. Keep piling it on this guy. And these guys have a lot of AoE. They're both doing their AoE attacks now, so I have to be ready for that. I'm going to just preemptively heal. Yikes. Alright, we got the battle burst coming up here. I'm going to use his level 1 battle burst, which ignores a lot of armor and does a lot of damage. Okay, so here comes their super attack. I've hit them enough now that even though I've avoided hitting the bottom guy, they're going to do their super attack. So let's see. I got to prepare for it. And if they target him, Garrison, on the bottom, he might actually die. So let's see who they've got in mind. Actually, I'm going to use his AoE. He's got an AoE battle burst. You should take a look at it. It's pretty cool. So this does a fair amount of damage to everybody in the party. It's best to use when there's more than one target to hit, and it puts a really nasty fire dot on him. Ooh, okay, so getting close to getting. I need to be careful because when I kill the top guy, the bottom guy has an incredibly powerful AoE attack, and he's going to enrage before he does it. So it's going to be something that could kill me in one hit. It could kill multiple heroes in one hit. So that ability right there does a lot of damage already. When the top guy is dead, he's gonna do an enraged version of that, and it's nasty. All right, better heal up. He's doing his wild barrage, which is a problem because it also hits his friend, my enemy, which gives him more rage and helps power up his super attack also. So let's just get it out of the way. Yikes. All right, we're going to finish him off here. I'm going to start damaging this guy because he's going to be... Actually, I'm going to... All right, guys, I think they're ready for the next demo, so I'm going to go ahead and hop out here. And yeah, that's Battle Chasers Nightwar. I hope you guys liked it. It's playable over in Hall 8, so if you want to see more of it, pop over there and take a look. Thank you.